In today's video, we are going to build a ChatGPT clone with Supabase and Next.js 13. Our ChatGPT clone has almost every feature that the real ChatGPT has. You can start your chat by asking question immediately, like this, hello world. And as you can see, it's streaming the response. You can regenerate the response by clicking this button. Also, you can change your current chat settings like this. If you want to use another model like GPT-4, you can choose from this select. But remember that it's almost 10x expensive than the previous model. Also, you can provide your own system prompt. When you ask the ChatGPT its name like this, what's your name? And it will say Maker AI because we have provided this system prompt. You can change this to try another prompt like this, and you can regenerate your response. As you can see, now it says, I am Faker AI, right? Yeah, cool. You can create new chat by clicking this button, and you can start your chat with the same input. Also, the app has authentication system. You need to log in your account to reach the app, to start chat, to use root handlers. And finally, our whole app is mobile responsive like this. You can use this app on your mobile devices as well. In our app, you can change the theme. We have dark theme and the light theme like this. In the near future, I will add prompts library. You can select, you can choose predefined prompts from the library, or you can save your responses into a collection. For example, you have created a blog post. You can save this blog post into your collections, into your database. And finally, we will create plugins. We will create GPT agents for this app. For example, you can get real-time data with Google search or etc. Our whole data stored in Supabase database. For example, if you reload this page, as you can see, we are getting whole data back from the database. If you are ready, let's get started. Okay, let's check how we structure our app. For the backend, we will use Supabase for authentication, authorization, and database. But for the sake of this course, we are not gonna dive into authentication part because I have already created a video that covers this topic. You can find this video from the description. I'll put the link into description. Okay, let's check our Supabase dashboard. Oops, sorry. Yeah, here. To see what we have created as tables and columns. You can see the profiles table, and you can learn how to create this table based on our users from the video that I mentioned earlier. For this app, we will create chats and messages tables. In chats table, we will hold our chats. In this table, we have a column for ID. This is primary key, and they created that. Title, the title of chat, and the owner. This is a relational column based on the profile table, the model, system prompt, and advanced settings. So we can get those data from Supabase and put this data into our state. Okay, cool. Now we have messages table, again the ID, and created that column, and the content for the response, OpenAI response, and the role for the OpenAI roles. For example, it can be user or assistant, user for user message, and assistant for OpenAI responses. And the chat ID, again, this is a relational column. Owner, this is the same column as in chat. Okay, cool. So based on these owner columns, we will create row level security, which means that only users can fetch their data if they are the owner of chat or message. To create this row level security policy, you can go to authentication part and the policy section. You can create new policy with this button. Let me show you what I created. I enabled all access, which means users can select, delete, update, or insert data with this policy if they are authenticated and if their UID equals the owner. As you may remember, we have created a column called owner, which is a relational column with profiles. So when we are adding messages or chats, we need to put this column into our table. And with that column, we will make sure that only owners can fetch their data or insert or update or delete their data. Okay, cool. Now we are done with Supabase. We can go our app and check our app structure. Okay, for the front-end part, we will use Next.js 13 with the new app directory and root handlers, as well as streaming in the new experimental edge runtime in root handlers. Also, we have some important package that I want to mention, like Jotai for state management. We are going to manage whole state with Jotai, and we will build our application logic inside Jotai. Also, we will use SWR for client-side data fetching. We will use ShadCN and Radix UI for UI library with Tailwind CSS. We will use React Markdown for rendering OpenAI's responses. Also, we will use Highlight.js for rendering code blocks in the OpenAI responses. Okay, cool. We can start with checking our application, our folder structure. In our app directory, we have two folders called chat and login. In login, we have a simple page, the login page, and we have a login form. If user is not logged in, we redirect user to the login page like this. If user tries to go homepage, he will be or she will be redirected to the login page. We create this logic inside of the middleware. We reach to the session with Supabase. And again, if you don't know how to do that, you can check my previous video that I covered this topic. We reach the session object in this middleware, and if there is no session and the path name starts with chat, we will redirect user to the login page. Or if there is a session and the path name equals the home page, we redirect it to chat page. because we don't use this home page in our application. We have only chat or login page. In our home page, we simply redirect user to the chat. As you can see, if there is no session and if user goes to the home page, he will be redirected to the chat, and after this redirection, he will be redirected to the login page. Okay, cool. And if there's session, he will be redirected to the chat. Cool. Now we can log into our account to see if it works. Yeah, cool. It works. In our chat page, we have a page for this chat route like this. And also we have a dynamic route based on chat ID like this. If we click this button, as you can see, we go to this route. This is a dynamic route based on the chat ID. And if there is chat, we can see the chat content. To make this happen, we need to fetch this chat in the server component and return this chat if it exists, and if it doesn't exist, we simply return not found function. This is a helper function from Next navigation, and the user will be redirected to the not found page. We can try this like this. We can simply remove a letter from ID. As you can see, there is no page like this. Okay, cool. Now we can go to our chat page again. Cool. Also, we fetch our data in the server component and pass this data as prompt to our chat box, as well as initial messages, the current chat based on the ID, and current chat messages like this. Okay, cool. So before diving into the more complicated part, we can check our UI first, because I want to show you how I created this sidebar, as well as the input part. Then we can dive into the business logic and the state management and the route handlers. Okay, cool. Now we can check our layouts first to understand how we structure our app. In the root layout, we have our providers, the Supabase provider, to use a single Supabase instance in our app. Our Supabase auth provider to manage our user and the authentication logic, and the team provider for this change team functionality. And lastly, we have a Jotai provider for our Jotai state management library. Normally, you don't have to use provider, especially in the single page applications that you build with React. But in SSR applications, you need to wrap your application with a provider. And if you want to learn more about Jotai, you can check my previous videos as well. But we will dive into some part of Jotai in this video when we come to business logic part. Okay, cool. Now we can check our chat layout, chat page layout. In this layout, we have a sidebar overlay. This is a overlay in mobile sidebar. When we click this button, when we click this overlay, we can close this sidebar on mobile. And also we have this sidebar. These are the same sidebars in desktop and mobile. We can check our sidebar first. In our sidebar, we have, and this is a stateful component, which means client component. The most important part in this component is this custom hook called useChats, because we manage our chats logic in this custom hook. As you can see, we return a chat handler from this hook. And with this handler, we control adding new chat functionality. When we click this button, as you can see, we are adding a new chat. So to understand the logic, let's check this custom hook. As you can see, we import bunch of stuff in this hook. For the auth and Supabase part, we have two separate custom hooks, but we are not going to cover this part in this video. And the states, right? We will use Jotai to manage our state, and we will dive into this part in the future. Right now, you can think these parts as regular use states. We simply hold our OpenAI settings in the state and chats and set chats. Okay, cool. In here, we have a simple fetcher. With this fetcher, we fetch our chats and the messages come like this. And we need to get our user ID since we have a row level security, right? Because only owners can fetch their data. That's why we need to pass our user ID into this function, and we need to be authenticated. Okay, cool. If we have data, we simply return this data, and we use SWR for this client-side data fetching, because we need to manage our is loading state and the mutations as well as cache. Because with this use SWR, we automatically cache our data. For example, if we fetch our chats, when we change the page, as you can see, we don't refetch again, because we have already fetched this data and cached this data. That's why we don't need to fetch it again and again, right? Okay, cool. Now we have this add new chat handler, as I showed you in this sidebar component. This is where we manage our add new chat functionality. And for this purpose, we need to reach our settings, right? Our model and the system prompt and the advanced settings. Because as you may remember, in our chats table, we have model, system prompt, and the advanced settings, right? Yeah. And we simply put new conversation for the title, and we mutate our state when we create new chat, because we need to list this new chat in this list, right? Like this. Cool. And finally, if we are succeed, we need to push the user to the new chat page, right? The chat and the ID, as you can see here, like this. And we we put this search param into URL because we need to know if it's a new chat or not. I'm gonna show you where we use this search param later. Okay, cool. Now, if we have the data, which means chat, this data, this chat list, we need to set this data into our state, this set, with this setter function called setChats. Remember, we import this state from Jotai, where we manage our state. Okay, cool. And finally, we return all these chats, is loading state, error, mutate, and the add chat handler. Okay, cool. Let's get back to our sidebar component if there is anything missing. We have a simple state and the setter for mobile menu to control the state of this sidebar. Also, we have a profile menu in the footer where we can control our theme like this, as well as logout function. But these are a bunch of basic stuff you can check from the source code later, right? I'm not gonna dive into this part. Okay, cool. Now we can close this tabs. Okay, cool. And we can go to our layout to see what is there. And after sidebar, we have children. And in this page, as you can see, we have a component called chatbox as children, right? We fetch our data in server and pass this component as props like this. Okay, let's check this chatbox component. In this chatbox component, we have another custom hook called useChat. This time we are controlling the logic, we are managing the logic of the current chat, the single chat, right? Not whole chats, the current chat like this in this page. Okay, cool. Let's check what we have this in this custom hook. And before going to this custom hook, as you can see, we pass our initial messages and our current chat that we get from our server component. Okay, cool. Now we can go to our useChat custom hook. In this custom hook, we have a bunch of states and the setters, but we are gonna dive into this part later this section. But first we need to set our initial messages and our current chat that we get from props, right? We fetch this data on the server, pass this custom hook, and now we need to set this data into our state, our messages state and our current chat state, right? And if you remember, there was a search param called new, right? If it exists, we know that it's a new chat. And if it's a new chat, we need to send our initial message. Let me show you. If we go to our chat page like this, this is the page where we redirect user after they log in. We can send our first message. Oops, sorry. Hello world again. And if we send this message, the user will be redirected to this URL with this search param. And if there is a search param called new, we know that we need to send initial message to get response, right? That's why we need to use our add message handler. And after we send our message, we need to delete this param, and also we need to replace this URL with this one, which means that we need to delete the search param. Okay, cool. And finally, we return this state has chat messages, because if the chat has messages, we don't want to show this pop-up. We want to show messages, right? That's why we need to know if there's a message or not. Okay, cool. Now we can go to our atoms to see how we manage our state and our logic. Okay, cool. Now let's go to our atoms folder. And in this atoms folder, we have a file called chat.ts where we keep our whole atoms related this chat feature. Okay, let me make this screen bigger and close this sidebar. Okay, cool. In this file, we have a default system prompt, and we have OpenAI settings atom where we manage the OpenAI settings for new chat. In this page, this chat page, when we change this model, we simply change this state, model, system prompt, and advanced settings. Okay, cool. And another thing is OpenAI payload. To combine all settings and messages in a state, we use this read-only atom. We simply get data from other atoms. To understand this atom, before we need to understand the other atoms like current chat atom, messages atom, and etc. Okay, let's keep continuing. This is a simple atom to control the handling state. When we send message, we are changing this state. If it's handling, you can see here, write me a basic React component. When OpenAI is responding, we set this handling atom to true, and if it's true, we can show this stop button like this, stop generating. If we click this button, it will stop. And if it's not handling, we can show this regenerate response button, right? Okay, cool. This is a ref that we create with create ref to control scrolling in this chat box. Because as you can see, if we are streaming, we need to scroll down as we, let me create another message. Okay, cool. Let's create another one for validation, form validation, like this. As you can see, as we goes down, we scroll down as well. That's why we need to have this ref in our state, right? Okay, cool. This is a simple atom to control the input value. And this is a chat ID atom. It's a read-only atom because we use this ID in everywhere. That's why if we want to get this atom, I didn't want to use this current chat atom every time. So this is a read-only atom. When the current chat atom changes, the ID changes as well. And we can simply get this chat ID from this atom. Okay, and the current chat atom, with this atom, we hold the current chat data. If there is a current chat, this is a chat with message count and settings. If there is no chat, it's a null. And the chats atom, where we keep our chats. And the messages atom, where we keep our messages. Okay. And the current chat has messages atom. As you may remember, we were controlling this state to show this pop-up or the messages. And this abort controller atom, if you remember, when we are streaming response, we have option to stop generating, right? That's why we need to control our fetch. To control our fetch, we need to create a board controller. With this controller, we can cancel our fetch. When we cancel our fetch, also we need to set handling atom, and also we need to set another abort controller to manage our fetch. Okay, cool. And we can write this logic in this cancel handler atom. With this atom, we can simply return if it's handling and the setter function to set our abort controller to abort and these states. Okay, the most complicated part is the add message atom. In this atom, we have a state, the handling state. We return this state from this atom, and also we return a setter function. In this setter function, we have two kind of actions called generate or regenerate. If user send regular message, we use this generate action. If user wants to regenerate response, we use this regenerate action. In this function, we first need to get our input value and is handling state and the chat ID. If it's already handling, we need to return. Or if there is no input value, with action generate, because if user wants to regenerate response, user already sent this message and there's nothing in this input, right? Okay, cool. And after this early return, we can build our user message object. We need to create this object in this function scope because we will use this object in inside some if else block. And this is add message to Supabase handler. As you know, we are using Supabase's database, right? We need to send our messages to the database because if, for example, if we refresh this page, as you can see, we get our messages from the database. That's why when we create message, we need to push this message into our state, but also we need to push this message into the database. That's why we need a add to Supabase handler. Okay, cool. Now we can start handling. If the action is generate, we know that user are sending message, right? That's why we need to add the user's message to the state. And also we need to clear the input, right? Okay, cool. Now we need to send this to the API. But first we need to create our initial message because our API will stream the response, but it takes time, right? We need to set this initial message to show the thinking state. As you can see, hi, my name is Batuhan, like this. It says thinking. To show this AI message before we get response from the OpenAI, we need to set initial message. And we need to set an initial ID for this message. We can create this ID with this UUID v4 function that we get from this UUID package. Okay, cool. Now we can send our payload to the R root OpenAI chat. To get our payload, if you remember, we have already created an Atom OpenAI payload. In this OpenAI payload Atom, we simply get our current chat state and we get our model from this state and also our system prompt and our messages like this. As payload, you need to set your model, your messages, and your advanced settings like this: model, system prompt, and advanced settings. And we put this system prompt with our messages. As we send message like this: do you remember my name? As you can see, it remembers my name because we are sending the whole chat history to the OpenAI from this state. In the near future, I will create another method because in OpenAI, as you may know, there is a token limit. The token limit is like 8,000 or 4,000. I don't remember the exact number at the moment. But as your chat history grows, you can go beyond these limits, right? So you need to create another logic for this purpose. And thanks to Supabase, we can create this logic, but it's a topic of another video. Okay, cool. Now we send our payload to our root, and also we need to set our signal into this fetch, because we need to control this fetch with this button, right? If we click this button, we simply set our board controller Adam. Where was this Adam? Yeah, in here. We simply change the state of this cancel handler Adam, right? Okay, cool. Now we can wait for the response. If it's not okay, we can throw an error, and if there is a data, this is a readable stream. I will show how we can create this kind of functionality with OpenAI and the new root handler in Next.js 13. And if there is a stream, we can read this stream, and we simply create a variable like this, done equals false, because we are still getting response from our fetch, right? It's streaming at the moment. And if it's not done, we need to set our messages with these chunks, right? In every time it streams another chunk like this. Please create a simple blog post for React state management. As you can see, we are getting chunks from the OpenAI, right? As we get those chunks, we need to set into our state. And if it's done, we need to, oops, it's still creating. It's amazing, right? Okay. If we still getting response, we need to set these responses, these chunks, into our state. Okay. And as we get the responses, as we set those chunks, we need to scroll down, right? That's why we need to get our chatbox ref. And if there's a chatbox ref, we need to scroll down. And finally, we need to stop handling, and we need to add those messages to the Supabase. We send this message, and also we get this response, right? We need to set those messages into Supabase like this. First, we need to understand if there is a user message or if it's only AI message. I mean, if we regenerate response, we simply delete this message, but we keep this user's message, right? That's why we don't need to send this message to the Supabase again, because we have already this message in Supabase. But if we regenerate the response, we don't have this message anymore. That's why we need to set the new response to the Supabase. That's why first we need to understand if it's a regenerate or generate. When we understand this, we need to change our dummy IDs that we created with the UUID package, because in our database we have our real IDs, right? That's why we need to change the dummy IDs with the real ones. For this purpose, we will need to create a for loop, and in this loop check and find our messages and set our IDs into these messages. Okay, cool. And in this part, this is the regenerate part. In this part, there is only the AI message because we are regenerating the response. And lastly, in our application, you can see that if we send messages, for example, we can say that, could you please tell me a little joke about American politics. When we get the message, we set our chat, our conversation name like this, American politics joke request. To get this title, we also use another rule called API/OpenAI and chat title. And if it's a new chat, which means that if the message length equals 2, we need to get this title, right? For this purpose, we can use our add message handler, because when we send a new message, and if there's only 2 messages, we can run this logic. To run this logic, we simply send our messages and the chat ID to the R root. I will dive into the roots after this section. And also, we need to set our title that we get from the response. Okay, the final function is the regenerate handler atom. In this function, we have a state. In this state, we simply check if we can regenerate or not. If we want to make this regenerate button active, we need to check if there is an assistant message. For example, in our chat page, there is no button, right? Because there is no AI response at the moment, which means that we cannot regenerate any message. And also if we are not handling, if we are already handling, which means that if we are already getting responses from our root, from the OpenAI, we cannot regenerate response. Let me show you. If we send, okay, cool, please summarize this post. Like this. It's already responding to our message. That's why we cannot show this regenerate response button. Cool. If these states are true, both of them, we can simply return this boolean. And with this regenerate handler atom, we can get this state, right? And also we have a setter function. In this function, we remove last assistant message because we want to regenerate, right? Like this. First, we need to remove it. And the last message has a role of assistant. We need to set this new state into messages atom. And we need to remove this message from our database as well. And finally, we need to send this new message with add message handler, and we need to set its action to regenerate, right? Because we are not generating based on our input value. We are regenerating, and user already sent the message, right? Okay, cool. It might be complicated for you. I mean the Jotai part. If the Jotai part is complicated for you, you can check my previous videos. I already explained the mental model behind this Jotai state management library. As you can see, it has a kind of atomic approach. You can combine atoms together and you can get the states in global environment. You don't have to pass those states from parent components. You can get the states in every component because it's global state. Like this, we can get this state in our chat box component, and also we can get this state in another components as well. Okay, cool. Now we can go to rendering part and the root handlers. Okay, let's check what we have inside our root handlers. In our API folder, we have two folders called OpenAI and Supabase. In Supabase folder, we have a root called message, and in this root, we simply insert message. First, we need to check if there is a message in our body. If there is no message, we return no message response. And we need to create our Supabase client to check if there is a session, which means that if user is authenticated. If there is no session, we need to return not authorized response. If there is user, we need to insert this message that we get from our body. and we can insert these messages like this. And if we successfully insert this message, we can return the inserted message. Cool. And the second one is the patch route. Currently, there's a bug with the delete request in Next.js 13.3.0. That's why I use patch, but in the future we can use delete. In this route, we simply delete the message from our database, because sometimes we regenerate the response, and if we regenerate the response, we need to delete this message from our database, right? With this route, we can make this happen. Okay, cool. And in OpenAI folder, in OpenAI route, we have two separate routes called chat and chat title. In this chat title route, as you can remember, we need to set the conversation title based on our message, right? Again, we check our session. If there is no user, there is no session, we return not authorized response. And if there is user, we need to get our conversation title. And for this purpose, we set a system prompt like this based on the previous conversation, which means that we have the two messages from the new chat like this. Hello, my name is Jotai. Can you help me to create a React component? As you can see, it sets our title based on these two messages. So we need to send those messages to the OpenAI. And we need to set our system prompt like this. And we should say return only the title. In this function, we use GPT-4 model, because GPT-4 model follows these system prompts in a more strict way, because with the previous model, sometimes it doesn't follow the rules which we declared in this system prompt. But you can try with the previous model. If you change your system prompt, you can try it. Maybe you can get a better response with the previous model. And if we have this response, we can send this response with our next response. But before sending this response, we need to set our title. That's why we have provided our chat ID with our messages. We can set our title with this function. Okay, cool. Now the chat route that we use to generate our responses. Again, if there is no session, we return not authorized. If there is no payload, we return no payload. And if we have both of them, we can simply call this function. So let's check this function and learn what it does. In this OpenAI stream function, we simply fetch this URL api.openai.com/v1/chat/completions. And to call this API run, we need to set our OpenAI API key. In our environment variables, you need to set your OpenAI key, and you need to set your Supabase URL and the public key. Okay, cool. Now, with this new readable stream function, we can create our stream. And in this function, actually, we simply say to the OpenAI, let's stream your response as chunks rather than sending the whole response when it's done. Because OpenAI is creating these response messages as chunks, and we can get those chunks as the OpenAI created, right? And in this function, we get these chunks and return this stream as result. And in our root, we stream this response, but to make this happen, we need to use this runtime, the edge runtime. This is much more cost effective and much more faster than the regular runtime, the Node.js runtime. Okay, cool. Now we have done with our root enders, so we can check our render function. Let's check our components folder. In our components folder, we have a folder called chat, and in this folder, we have a file, a component called message. And in this component, we render our messages. If it's an assistant message, we render this avatar, or if it's a user's message, we render this profile image. And for our message, we use this React Markdown library. With this library, we can render Markdown as JSX elements. As you may remember, we have a system prompt in our atoms. Let me show you. Okay, in here, OpenAI payload atom, we say always answer in Markdown to the OpenAI. That's why we are getting Markdown content from the response, right? So we can render this Markdown as JSX with this React Markdown library. In this library, we can create controllers like this. If it's a code block, we can create a custom logic for this block. If it's a code block and if it's an inline code like this, let me show you. create a React component for login with input state. In this response, this is a code block, and these are inline codes. For inline codes, we simply return this styling, and for the code block, we return this because the children is our message, and for our message we can use highlight.js. With highlight.js we can style this code block in a way that we want. For example, in this application I use highlight.js with Github dark CSS style. And also we can create a logic for copying this code. For example, I copy this code and I can paste into our VS Code, right? Like this. Okay, cool. To create this logic, we need to pass a ref into our code block because we need to copy the content inside of this code block, right? For that purpose, we can create a reference with use ref hook, and we can pass this ref into our code block like this. And when we click this button that we created with another library called copy to clipboard, you can install this library from react-copy to clipboard, and as text prop we can provide with our ref code ref dot current dot inner text as string. And when we click this button, we simply this code block. Okay, cool. I think now we are done. Let me check if there is anything that I miss. Yeah, it looks like we are done. Okay, cool. So what's next? I will create another features that I mentioned earlier, like prompts library, collections, and plugins. And also I will create another logic for holding our chat history in Supabase's vector database, which means that we can hold our chat history in a vector database, and we can recall this data when we need, and we can pass this data with a chat history. With this approach, we can create global memory for our chat application. For example, if we recall all the message that we have, we can ensure that ChatGPT can remember everything in our every chats, right? As a next video, I will create this logic for this app, and after that we will create these features, prompts library, collections, and plugins with the GPT agents. Thank you for watching, guys. And if you are curious about the future of this app, please make sure to subscribe my channel, and also you can put a star into my Github Repo.